guess we will have to see how Dortmund will handle this. Jamie Gittens has asked for an exit at BVB. I find this one so very interesting because he is a player that was extremely hyped at the first half of the season, got plenty of playing time under Nuri Sahin. I be quite frank with you, I never quite understood the hype. I thought he was very one-dimensional. The joke that I have in our chat is he's the English David Odonka. Very quick, but that's about it.
Odonka catching strays this week.
But David Odonka played in the World Cup. That's like nothing to joke about. He didn't do much after that, but that's a different story too. But I think
Odonka was amazing in Pro Evolution Soccer. I might be confusing him with someone else. But...
yeah, he was so fast. I think he was the fastest player you can get.
He was always a great player to have in that game.
Yeah, super quick.
I'm sure Gittins is great. I don't even know if Pro Evolution Soccer still exists, but I'm sure he's great at FIFA.
Oh, yeah, that's not even called FIFA anymore. It's called EAFC. This is terrible. But yeah, Gittins, I just don't know. I think he scored that amazing goal against Bayern Munich where he kind of overran the entire flank and then scored a goal, made Konrad Laimer look like Konrad Laimer, I guess. And then the hype train just left the station, choo-choo, here we go. And, there was talk about 100 million euros for that Dortmund will want to ask for him. And I was just like, what? Like for a body of work that's 6-7 games at this stage, like what are we talking about here? Now that has come down to 60 million euros, and even that I think is hugely inflated. Stefan, I mean, he's hardly playing now, and when he's playing, we have occasions like last week where Adeyemi comes on, and it's just miles better, right? Is better in the box, is just as quick, has more depth, probably a higher ceiling. I don't know. You wrote your newsletter on it. I am very skeptical when it comes to Jamie Gittins. I am sure that there will be a Premier League team that will just plaster Dortmund full with money and give them everything that they want. And Dortmund will probably be laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. As I said on social media today, like 6 months ago, he looked like he had the world at his feet. He was going to go on and become this kind of the next kind of graduate from the Dortmund finishing school of world-class players. And things have kind of changed very dramatically for him. There's a big story in the local press in Dortmund this week about him basically saying that he wants to leave the club, and he's told players basically, it's one of these kind of stories that no one's really specifically quoted, although I guess he is technically quoted by second-hand sources, saying that he's apparently said, I'll be gone soon anyway, and I'll definitely not be playing here next year. So apparently what he said about to his teammates about leaving Dortmund. And I kind of put together a newsletter this week just because I wanted to kind of explain what's been going on there for the last kind of 6 months. Why? Because a lot of people who don't really follow German football probably saw him score a couple of world-class goals, before Christmas and thought, okay, this guy's well on his way to becoming like the next Jadon Sancho or Christian Pulisic or, Dembele or whatever else. And it hasn't really quite worked out. And it's quite interesting in the sense that there was a story saying that Arsenal are looking to sign him for about 50 or 60 million euros, and I posted on social media saying Arsenal would be crazy to buy him for 50 or 60 million euros, and Dortmund would be crazy not to accept an offer of 50 or 60 million euros. And there were definitely some Arsenal fans who were like, wait, hold on, what's going on? He's saying that's too much. He's saying it's not enough. And I was basically saying, like, I don't think he's ready for that level because he hasn't even proved himself at Dortmund, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I had some stats from the newsletter that I think are actually quite startling, to be honest with you, especially from that game itself, the Wolfsburg game itself. For example, he started the game. He started both the last two games because Maximilian Bayer's been out injured with an ankle injury. So that's really the only reason he's been starting these games. But he didn't log a single shot on or off target in that match. He managed just one pass into the opposing box, which was a cross that was off target. And he didn't register a single touch of the ball in the opposing half. So that's him playing for about 68 minutes, I believe it was. And just a complete entity on that left-hand wing, which I really think is quite startling. And I went into the newsletter kind of talking about what's gone wrong for him. And I think the crucial thing for Gittins and why his kind of Dortmund career has kind of gone off a cliff is because Kovac has come into the club. And Kovac has obviously been given the remit to kind of fix this team to kind of, light a fire under their backsides, to make sure they play well, to find some sort of order to the chaos that has been their season. And one player who has undoubtedly had to step aside because he doesn't fit into that plan is Gittins. As I said in the newsletter, prior to Kovac arriving at the club, Gittins was averaging 68.6 minutes per appearance in the league. And since Kovac has come in, that number's dropped to less than half that. So it's now just 33.7 minutes. And that includes the 2 starts he's had recently, which is only due to Maximilian Bayer coming in. And, Manuel, anyone who's been watching Dortmund this season will know that prior to Kovac, when there was Nuri Sahin, it was this kind of end-to-end, as I said, stramash from one end to the next in Dortmund games, where it was counter-attacking football, where Dortmund would lose the ball, their team would attack, Dortmund would get the ball, they would attack. And that was the kind of football that clearly suited Gittins because he's a fast winger. He's a guy who likes to take on players. So he likes when the game opens up. He likes when there's more space to run into. And, as a player who primarily likes to score goals, that's exactly what that's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to be in a game that is end to end. But while that maybe suited Gittins, it obviously didn't suit Dortmund.
Mm-mm.
And how many times did we sit and watch Dortmund play, especially away from home in the Bundesliga in the first half of the season, and they just completely struggled to control games. And I think to Kovac's credit, he's come in and he's tried to fix that. He's obviously brought some sort of formation, some sort of system, and that's something that the team just completely lacked under Nuri Sahin. And I think to do that, he's had to remove Gittins from that team because he's a player who just wants to take the ball. He wants to run at players. He wants to try and score goals. He's not really a winger in the traditional sense where he's looking to see where the striker is. He's a player who just wants to cut inside and shoot as often as he can. And that's his remit. That's his prerogative. And, maybe he'll find a club that can work around that and turn him into a fantastic player. But at this moment in time, Dortmund need a winger who can set up chances for Guirassy and play in a specific system. And Gittins just isn't that. And, going off the back of that report in Germany on Sunday, or Monday, I think it was, the conclusion to my newsletter is basically either because he doesn't want to or because he can't. He just can't fit into Dortmund's tactics going forward. And the club, I think, as they said, we've got someone asking, Pertusha's just asking there, like, what's the minimum offer that Dortmund would require to sell him if they make Champions League? Do they need to get his money? I think probably, Man, I'll let you jump in here in a minute here, but I don't think it's even got anything to do with whether they qualify for the Champions League or not. I think they're probably looking at thinking, we sell him while his stock's at its highest. We sell him while clubs like Arsenal and Chelsea are fighting over his signature. And we wish him the very best of luck. And we kind of move on because Dortmund have a number of positions that need to fill. Kovac has half a squad that he's probably going to have to recruit this summer to kind of get Dortmund back to fight to match fitness and to competing for the top 4. And I think that job would be a lot easier if they probably did sell Gittins in the summer and recoup that money and spent it elsewhere.
Yeah, so to answer that question, it's probably around 60 million euros that they were looking for. I assume it will be less than that. And I'm just looking up the numbers. I did a story for Forbes on how much the German teams could earn from the Club World Cup. And it's different for every club from UEFA. From teams from South America, it's a flat fee. For Oceania, it's a flat fee, and from all the other confederation, it's a flat fee too. But the starting money for teams from UEFA competition starts with 38.91 million, and the lowest is 12.81 million, which is for Red Bull Salzburg. They ranked the lowest, and I think Dortmund will receive, just to start at the tournament, 26.6 million, and could earn up to just under 100 million euros, 90 million euros if they win the Club World Cup. So, that is a fair amount of money. I think they are on course on qualifying for the Champions League. The way the teams ahead of them have been playing, it is looking increasingly likely that they are going to get there somehow. But let's say they don't and they finish 5th in the Europa League. Eintracht Frankfurt earned about 21.5 million euros from the Europa League stage. So not even that doesn't include the knockout. It's just the league stage. They're one of the top earners in that competition. last year. Dortmund will probably earn more from that because they have a higher stadium capacity. And so, even with just the Europa League, we're probably still looking at about 25 to 26 million euros that Dortmund would get. And then you add the Club World Cup to that, where I suspect they will go deep because of the way the group stage is set up. There's a lot of money coming at Borussia Dortmund, even without Champions League football. So there is no need to sell. I want to contextualize the report from Ruhrnachrichten that you quoted. It's a very strong report. Jürgen Körs is a journalist I know personally. He has very, very good connections within the Dortmund dressing room. If he reports what he reported, then that is as good as it gets. We had a question down here. Where did we get those club figures from? FIFA actually published them. And also, I have a link in the article that I wrote for Forbes, which you can find quite easily. Just Google Forbes Bundesliga Clubs Club World Cup. It should come up pretty quickly for you. But there's a link to the FIFA site where all those figures are listed. And I need to add to Paul Tenorio from The Athletic, did a report for North American clubs as well, where he kind of broke it down. But yes, these numbers are actually publicly available on the FIFA site. Just do a little bit of digging and we'll be there. Stefan, long story short, what will they be asking for? I keep hearing that figure 60 million euros. I personally think that's too much for him. But there has been one report where he's been linked with Chelsea, and that they might be looking in cashing in Carney. I think if you can get that, you need to do it. If you can somehow cash in trade, these trade transfers almost never happen, so it's a little bit of a what if. But if you can somehow get a deal with Chelsea where Gittins goes one way and Carney goes the other way, I think that is one that you have to do. Dortmund probably need Carney way more than they need Gittins.
Yeah, I would say so. We've talked about Carney Chukwuemeka and whether he'll stay at Dortmund a few times in the recent weeks, and it's still up in the air. We'll have to kind of see what happens there. I think the transfer fees maybe not so much the issue. It just depends how much he's on at Chelsea. He might be on absolutely crazy wages because he was obviously a very highly sought after player when he signed for Chelsea. I know these these players can kind of go from hero to zero very quickly at Chelsea these days because there's just so many of them, and that's maybe maybe that's a concern or a something that Gittins should bear in mind if he opts for Chelsea. But look, the kid's from London; he knows his way about the Premier League. He knows how these clubs work. I think Arsenal would be an interesting move for him, but. Like I've said to Arsenal fans all week, I'm just not entirely sure he's ready to step in and become, a first team player for them. I know there's a real kind of push for them to kind of bring in a backup or some sort of extra support for Martinelli on that left wing. And it might work out at Arsenal, but I think the key thing is just that it hasn't really worked out at Dortmund. And if they can get 50 or 60 million euros from this summer, then I think that'd be good business, Manu. I think the concern obviously is, and I was tempted to put this in the newsletter because there's that kind of Alexander Isak shadow hanging over the club in the sense that, a player who got away and went on to become a really top class player. But the difference between Isak, I think, and Gittins is that Isak went off and learned his trade in Spain and developed into the player that he was going to become. It's not like he was this player that he is for Newcastle right now when he was in the Dortmund youth team. I think it's a very different situation. This is a young player who's demanding first team football, who thinks he should be playing at the very highest level, whereas he's really struggling to perform for Dortmund. So I think in this case, and I think from what I've read, on Reddit and Dortmund forums and stuff, I think most Dortmund fans are probably quite content to let him go as well. So I think this one will probably reach its natural conclusion in the summer.
Yeah, and Isak was politics too, right? It was Thomas Tuchel clashing with the scouting team over the signing of Isak, and Tuchel was wrong. It's quite simple. And so, he ended up going somewhere else. And when Dortmund tried to bring him back from that loan, he didn't want to come back. It is an interesting comparison, but a completely different story. I guess our conclusion is if, Dortmund can sell Gittins, they should.